For NYup, Syracuse.com, this is Matt Parrino, joined as always by Ryan Talbot, and we are breaking down the top prospects that the Buffalo Bills are likely looking at ahead of the 2019 draft, number 9 selection. And next up, Florida State's edge rusher, Brian Burns, a very intriguing prospect. When you peel back the layers a little bit, he's a guy that has been gaining steam as this process has gone along because he has the traits, and that's this time of year when guys come into the NFL draft as a top prospect and they flash these NFL skills, superb athleticism, former basketball player, so he's super explosive. I think that NFL teams gravitate towards those kind of skill sets, and Brian Burns brings that to the table. There were some issues with his weight, what he was playing with at Florida State. He did weigh in a little heavier at the combine, but what are your impressions of Brian Burns when you take a look at him, Ryan?
Let me come right out and say this. I am a big Brian Burns fan. I might even argue that he is the best edge rusher in this year's draft class. I think he could end up having a better career than Nick Bosa. So I'm gonna throw that out there right off the bat. I'm a big fan of his game. You mentioned that he bulked up for the combine. Still ran a 4.5 40. I've watched a lot of his career at Florida State. Especially in 2018. I was always impressed with his flexibility, his bend, so to speak, his ability to get around. I think that he is an outstanding pass rusher. There are some questions about his run defense, but when you look at Buffalo, you only have Jerry Hughes locked down for the 2019 season. Shaq Lawson's status is up in the air beyond this year. Trent Murphy didn't play up to his salary in his first year in Buffalo. So, there are a lot of question marks about getting those edge rushers, and I really think that Burns could come in and assume one of those roles and really come right in and make an impact right away for Buffalo.
So with Burns, it's also interesting. I think he is a candidate. I agree with you. I think he has the potential to be one of the best edge rushers in this draft. And I think that at number 9, it might be a little bit high because of what he's going to give you in 2019. I don't necessarily think he's ready to contribute at the level that maybe you want out of your 9th overall pick. I think his scheme is very important. He'll fit very well into a 4-3, and with Sean McDermott's defense, they can bring him along slowly because they do have some depth at that position right now, especially this year, to maybe run him out there for 40 to 50% of the snaps and let him get accustomed to the speed of the game at the next level, figure himself out as a pass rusher. But I think that, like you said, there's so many scenarios when you work through the first round that could end up with the Bills trading down. And whether it be to that 15 to 20 range, maybe even the early 20s, I could see Burns potentially falling to that range because of the depth on the defensive line. I mean, you look in the interior defensive line with Quinnen Williams, Ed Oliver, Christian Wilkins, and then on the edge, Bosa and Allen right off the top in the top 5. And then obviously Rashawn Gary, who's another guy that's more, the excitement level is more about what he could be than maybe what he necessarily was at Michigan. And I think Burns is a very, very interesting option for the Bills in this draft.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know he wouldn't be for everyone at number 9. If the Bills did end up taking him at 9, I would think that would be a quality use of the pick. But, I do see him on a lot of these mock drafts going in the middle of the first round. If they do trade back in the middle of the first round, even closer to 20, he could be there, and at that point, you're definitely getting a value. He's a guy that I also think is going to excel in the NFL when he gets a little bit better coaching, some of that professional coaching. I think that Sean McDermott could really get a lot out of him early on in his career, and then he could develop into a true playmaker on the defensive side of the ball.
This team needs to add playmakers, especially on the edge when it comes to rushing the quarterback. 26th in the NFL in sacks last year. And, there were some games you remember watching last year, Ryan, where when they were dialed in and things were working, this defensive line was getting after quarterbacks and they were pressuring. But you want to see that sack total rise a little bit. And I think that Brian Burns is a guy that can definitely add a dimension to this pass rush. One thing I will mention when it comes to the weaknesses on his scouting report, he does struggle quite a bit in as a run defender, and that's something that in 2019, if you're just looking at it for that year alone, and you bring Shaq Lawson back, that's the strength of Lawson's game. He really adds a lot off the edge, containing the run. I think if you were to pair those two together in kind of a rotation, you might have something really special there. And I will say as well, I do agree with you. I don't necessarily think that at 9 you're not getting the value in Burns. I think that what I'm arguing more for is the value that you'd add by trading down a few picks and still being able to draft them.
Oh, without a doubt. And I must say, you said that perfectly in terms of the Shaq Lawson pairing with Burns. And I'll say that Lawson showed more in 2018 as a pass rusher than he has in any of his previous seasons with the Bills. But you put him in on those obvious run downs or those maybe the first, second down, where the opposing team might still pass the ball, and Lawson can show off his skill set in both areas. But yeah, you bring Burns in as a rookie on those obvious passing situations, especially in like the second half of games where he's still pretty fresh. He could do some damage against opposing offensive tackles that have been in there for multiple snaps and are getting tired, because he does have a pretty impressive arsenal in terms of his pass rush. I do like his pass rush moves, but you're right. There are some issues there in terms of needing to get better as a run defender, and that can obviously come in time. Burns has even said leading up to the draft that Buffalo has been one of the teams that has shown the most interest in him. So it will be interesting to see if he is on Buffalo's radar, if they do trade back. Because if they do, I could see him being a top target available at that point.
Great stuff, Ryan. And guys, we'll have you covered for all NFL Draft Buffalo Bills content. Keep it locked on to NYup, Syracuse.com.